You're listening to the Decidedly podcast with Sanger Smith and Sean Smith. Our mission is to help business owners like you defeat bad decision-making so you can improve your health, wealth, and relationships. We do this by digging deep into the stories and expertise of our guests and distilling their knowledge into actionable wisdom for you to carry into your life and business. If you're new to the show, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. If you prefer to watch this week's episode, head on over to YouTube for the full video. Now, let's get into this week's episode and defeat bad decision-making in your life and business.
How's it gone being a dad for the first 2 weeks?
Well, the day he was born was like the best day of my life. And then the next day was the worst day of my life because we took him to the NICU. You know, he was born at a birthing center, and 4 or 5 hours after he was born, we left the birthing center and went home. And Megan walked out of the birthing center on her own. She did the whole thing unmedicated, and it was we were in and out, and we go home. Midwife comes the next day and is like, yeah, there's something wrong with his heart. You take him to the NICU. And long story short, obviously he's okay.
But it had to be so scary though.
Oh, it was super scary. It was like the scariest thing ever. And it was the most nerve-wracking thing ever. And you're already not going to sleep when you have a newborn.
Right.
You really are not sleeping.
I didn't experience that myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, then, you know, what I was going to say is it gave me a new appreciation for all of the sacrifices that you made as a father, but I take that back because obviously you didn't. You slept? Well, so you deserve all the back talk you got when I was a little kid.
Mom told me one time, she was like giving me shit one time. She goes, yeah, you know, you remember the other night and you said, oh yeah, Sanger slept through the night. She goes, he no, he didn't. Like you did.
Yeah, no,
I thought you did. I thought everything was fine.
I have not been able to make that mistake. Yeah.
Well, you can learn a lot from me on like what not to do.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. My motto, my operating principle was I didn't smell it. I didn't hear it. And that didn't fly.
Well, one of my principles is to not complain. And one is complaining. It only makes it harder. Like for myself,
it just makes you look like a little bitch.
Well, even if I'm complaining to myself, you know, I'm framing the situation as a negative to myself. Yeah. I want to frame it as a positive. So anytime he does something, you know, poops on the table, it's funny. I choose to think it's funny instead of choose to go, oh, this is so inconvenient. Anytime he cries in the middle of the night, I'm like, this is funny because one day, like, he's not going to do this, and I'll be able to, I'll remember it. Like, you know, it's that type of suffer memory that years later you're like, dude, remember how much that sucked?
Yeah.
Like, so I choose to go, oh yeah, I'm getting more of these suffer memories.
I remember one of my suffer memories was you were, you had to have been like one, you know, that age where you're learning to walk and, you know, but kind of running. And I think we were changing your diaper on the floor or something like that in the kitchen. And you jumped up and started running through the house, and it was cute. Right? Because you had this little naked baby running through that.
Yeah.
And then you started crapping as you were running. And now we're trying to catch you, but avoiding the landmines that you're leaving behind.
And I probably thought it was funny.
You did. Yeah. And it's funny now. It wasn't funny then.
See, you choose to just make it funny in the moment.
Yeah.
So I won't complain, partly because it makes it harder. Second, because nobody cares,
right.
You know?
Yeah,
and then third, because some people have it way worse.
Yeah.
Some people have twins. And I'm like, that's a whole different level of suffering. Speaking of twins, speaking of having twins, our guest today, Adam Haidary, not only does he have 2 11-month-old twins, but he is former police officer who chose to leave the profession and start a new profession, training officers to perform at their peak, learn martial arts skills, learn how to effectively use combat in a real police officer setting. He's transforming police department's ability to handle conflict. Really smart guy, tremendous entrepreneur. He started multiple companies with this mission. And he had a lot of wisdom to share with us, not just on how to improve officers' combat readiness, but as a business owner too, that I think you'll really be interested in. So stick around, enjoy our conversation with Adam Haidary. I'm Sanger Smith with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly. Hey, Adam, thanks for being here.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are y'all?
I'm doing good. I stayed up a little late last night tending to my newborn baby, but also watching cop beatdown videos where cops where cops deal with an unruly citizen and then just...
I could watch those nonstop.
This is one of my favorite YouTube genres.
I could watch those. And it's the ones from like Brazil or something where they're not playing around. Those are my favorite.
Right. Outside of the U.S., they go a little bit hard sometimes.
Yeah, they abide by a different set of rules in certain areas.
Well, yeah, that is for sure. Did you see the one? This just came out like 2 days ago. I just saw it. And so this guy gets pulled over, and he lets them know he's got a pistol. They pull him over. I think he blew a stop sign or something. And so he's got a pistol. He tells them, and so they bring other cars, and they're going to get him out of the car. And he's doing everything right. He like opens the door. He gets out. He's like signaling touchdown. Like his hands are way in the air. And this officer comes over to get his gun out of his waistband and shoots him with it. Like in the leg. She's pulling it out and it just blows his leg.
The worst case scenario.
Oh yeah. Because this guy did nothing wrong.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was rough. What did you see that?
I did. Yeah, we posted that on one of our channels. That's just unfortunately sometimes the level of officer that is being produced right now. You know, there's just a lot of incompetency, lack of training, and that's purely what that was. I mean, obviously there was no intention of her wanting to shoot somebody in the leg with their own gun, right? It's purely lack of understanding of weapon manipulation and things like that. And this is actually this is a very unfortunate circumstance within the profession right now. Is just the low level of training and understanding of how to do the profession correctly.
So what do you think went wrong there, other than her shooting him with his own gun?
Yeah. Well, everything. So that really shouldn't have happened, right? So again, it goes back to level of training and being a competent individual within the profession. And that's kind of where I think there are certain individuals that take this job thinking it's just a job. Right? This job is very unique. Being a police officer is a very unique profession because you're expected by society to be an expert in absolutely everything, right? Tactician, driver, negotiator, medical professional, combatives, expert. You're expected whenever you show up, people want you to solve a problem. And if you can't solve that problem, then people usually get rowdy. They get upset. You go viral on some type of social media platform. So the whole issue with law enforcement is quality of individual and the training of said individual. And that's where the issue lies within law enforcement. And obviously you pay what you get for, right? So you pay people. I started law enforcement at $29,000 a year, right? So like you pay somebody, and I have a college degree at a college. That's not that much money, right? So like I could go do that, or I could win and sold insurance, or literally done anything else and probably made more money. So you have to make the job livable for certain people, because most cops, they work secondary jobs, they work overtime, and that's hence why now you get the fatigue. I don't have time to train because I'm too busy working overtime. So it is a vicious cycle.
That's such a struggle with a lot of government positions. I mean, would I rather have wildly overpaid police officers or wildly underpaid police officers? I'd rather my police officers be making $250,000 a year, but I think if you ask the general public, you poll people would be inclined to say I'm more worried about overpaying. And I think that ignores human motivation, the reality of our motivations as people. And most people are not taking any job just out of the goodness of their heart. We're factoring in other things, our ability to provide for our family and ourselves. That's a major factor. Might not be the primary factor for selecting a career, but it's got to play a role. And if a certain city is underpaying their police officers, their firefighters, their school, public school teachers, like, yeah, it's going to impact the quality. And for some reason, it seems to me like the public doesn't want to acknowledge that reality.
Well, you said you guys are just watching police content, right? It's one thing to watch it. It's one thing to be in it, right? It's a very unique position. It's really easy to sit on the couch and watch cops go, I can't believe he did that or she did that. And yeah, some of those, we all do it, right? One thing that we've tried to do is, as someone who's basically dedicated their life to training law enforcement, is try to objectively look at why that even happened, right? And what was the root cause of it? And sometimes it is the individual. Like, they're just not built for this job. This job is not meant for everyone. And that is a hard way out. I mean, I've had guys that I've trained, cause I was a training sergeant, go through the academy, the entire police academy, get into FTO, and literally 2 weeks later, just say this job isn't for them.
And what are the character traits that would like tip you off to that?
Well, it's really interesting. So it's become increasingly difficult. I would say lack of communication skills is probably the biggest shortcoming. We can talk about all the positive attributes someone must have: being fit, having martial arts experiences, definitely a plus. Having some type of life experience is a huge plus, which then kind of translates into the communication skills. Because again, when people call you, they're not calling you to come hang out at a barbecue. They're calling you to come solve a problem. A lot of those problems are life problems, right? And so if you can't relate to someone, it's really hard to level if you have no life experience with that. So you got some of these guys, 21, 22 years old, asked to solve problems that they've never experienced themselves, or even somewhat similar of a situation. So the attributes that I like to see, besides the physical skill attributes, which I think are the foundational attributes, are communication skills, critical thinking, and deductive reasoning. Being able to look into a situation and solve the problem that may not be black and white, right? That's not a race thing. That's just more of a figure of speech. Let me be clear on that. And it's becoming increasingly difficult simply because of these things. People don't talk as much anymore. And so it's really interesting when you arrive on scene, and we've done scenario-based training where I've had newer, younger officers, and it's just, they're robots. And it's just, it's the worst. And it's like, just be human. Just talk like a normal person.
Is there a way to screen for that early on? I mean, you don't want to find that out on the job.
There is, but it is extremely difficult due to lack of applicants, right? Law enforcement struggles to bring people in. And so what some agencies are doing is they're lowering the standard of officer to increase numbers, right? The turnover rate in law enforcement is relatively high. Okay. I can't speak for a particular agency, but let's just say it's around 3 to 4 years.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You truly don't understand the profession, at least from my experience, till about 2 years in. So you're just learning what to do 2 years in. Now, that doesn't even include advanced level tactics, firearms training, combatives, case law knowledge, medical training. There's just so much more that kind of goes into it.
That's just getting someone like on the beat.
Right? Yeah. I mean, cops are extremely undertrained before they even start the job. Like, I'll give you an example. My first traffic stop as a actual police officer, I was pretty like, what's next? Pretty terrifying, but not uncommon, right? I didn't have a great FTO when I first started. So field training officer, he's the person that accepts you after the academy, and they're basically there to kind of train you up on how they do the job. Now, that's a very important role, as you could understand. You're taking someone who's still soft claying and trying to mold them into what you want to be, the ideal police officer, right, for society. So that job is extremely, extremely important. And a lot of it's just checkbox. This person's been here for 7 years. Great. They're an FTO. Check the box. There's no advanced level leadership training, organizational training. So again, I can't speak for all agencies. I'm just talking very generalized here. There are some agencies that are super squared away, and they have some really good processes there. So the screening process, to answer your question, the screening process has been greatly reduced due to the lack of interest in people becoming police officers. And so when that happens, you start to scrape somewhat of the bottom of the barrel for people who are just looking for jobs. And then when you get people looking for jobs in this profession, you get people who then shoot people in the leg that aren't supposed to be shot in the leg.
I hadn't thought a lot about that soft skill stuff because, a lot of the things that you're posting, a lot of the things, and you're training on is around sort of the physical aspect of it, the MMA and, all of that. And I remember, I don't know if I've told you this story, but I know Sanger has heard this story. There was a time, you remember when we went to Argentina, we were coming back through the Miami airport.
Yes.
And we were with a group of guys. I think there were about 12 of us or so. And we had
a hunting trip.
A hunting trip. So we had all brought at least one shotgun with us.
Father-son group with 2 shotguns per person.
Yeah.
Going through the Miami airport.
And getting them into Chile and Argentina wasn't a problem because we just showed them this document and they're like, okay. But getting everything back through Miami airport was a challenge. And so we roll through and we've got to go to this bulky luggage place and pick it up and get it checked and transfer it over to the next plane. It's a real hassle. And so we go down to like what seemed like the basement of the Miami airport. And we got to pick up all of these gun cases on this wheeled cart. And it's 7 feet high of gun cases. And they've got one little woman working behind a desk, and English wasn't her first language. And she's trying to communicate with us how to take these one by one. She's going to take these one by one, and she's struggling to get these gun cases off the lift, and then puts them down, and she's got to undo the combination on every single one of them. And she won't let anybody help her. She won't let us touch them. And so one of the guys who was a little bit of a hothead noticed is there's about 3 guys off in the corner, just kind of sitting around, not doing anything. We've got to catch a flight, all of us. And so he yells at him. He's like, why don't you guys get over here, and help this woman rather than playing grab ass over there, or whatever he said. But it wasn't the best way to handle it. But
no.
They responded as you might expect. And then they called the cops. And so the cop comes down here to this area, and we're like, oh man, this is gonna go south. And so the cop gets and he stands in front of this guy, our friend, in only the way that either a police officer or your coach in high school stands in front of you, and he's looking right at him, like standing about a foot from his face. And he just looks at him and he kind of whispers and he just says, dude, I know, I get it. And it just diffused the whole situation. And everybody just went, okay, all right, it is what it is. And everybody's temperature just went down. And it was, I was like, man, that's some soft skills right there.
Yeah, there's not a
I don't know how you coach
how to
that.
handle that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a difficult trait to teach. It's almost a learned over life. And then that, again, it kind of goes back to the life experience. I became a cop at 22 or 23 years old. So extremely young, very limited life experience. Knowing what I know now and becoming a cop would probably be a little bit better. But yeah, it is a very difficult trait, which is probably one of the most important traits, because you can really, just like you said, defuse a situation. But not only that, being able to just articulate yourself in a way that people can understand, because you may have a super high vocabulary, they may not, right? And then vice versa. So you being able to understand a wide variety of individuals is extremely important, and being able to level with them and reason with them is extremely important, and knowing when to do your job. And that, again, it kind of goes back to the knowledge and skills that one possesses, then gives them the confidence to do the job, because confidence is a lot of it, right? Like we talk about the first level of force for law enforcement, right? And that's officer presence. It's just being there, just you showing up in uniform, not even saying a word. right? And so the way you look, the way you present yourself is a use of force. And a lot of people, if you show up looking like a soup sandwich, people aren't going to take you seriously. You show up fit, looking sharp, your gear's clean, your gear's squared away. People are going to be like, okay, maybe I should pay attention now. Maybe, authority, let's just say, quote unquote, authority, I hate that word, is here to help solve the problem. And so that's why we kind of harp on more of the physical aspect, as I personally believe it's the foundation of policing, basically, is your ability to physically do something. Because if you can't physically do it, then you can only talk so much sometimes, and that's where you have to be a very competent and capable person. And that's one of the things that's basically why I started doing what I do now currently, is because of those two important attributes, the fitness side and then the actual going hands-on side.
Well, there's a confidence that you get when you're able to handle yourself physically and you know what it's like to have someone attack you and to be able to defend yourself. And training jujitsu, I think, gives you the ability to be better with your words, because when there's a high intensity and there's an environment where it's easy to have high emotions, somebody's yelling at you, somebody's threatening you. When you know in the back of your mind that you can't handle yourself physically, you're more likely to get scared. You're more likely to be afraid. You're more likely to be angry. You're more likely to react emotionally, and reacting emotionally, because that's the only tool you have. And reacting emotionally to someone who's, coming at you emotionally usually is going to escalate the situation. Just the other day I went to Goodwill to drop something off. I'm walking in the door, and as I'm walking in between two cars, one of the cars kind of starts to back up out of his space as I'm walking in between them. And I remember I didn't even look at the car. I kind of thought to myself, he could have waited for me to go 3 steps before he kept backing up, but whatever. I don't acknowledge him, don't look. I'm not upset. I go in, I put my bags down in Goodwill. I talk to the guy for a bit. I get my receipt and I walk out. And as I'm walking to my car, I hear, "Hey, you MFer." And I turn around, I'm like, whoa. I look and it's the same truck. And he starts shouting at me all these things. "Hey, you idiot," this and that and the other thing. And I was so caught off guard. I said, "Hey, dude, did you wait for me so you could yell at me about this?" "Yeah, you almost hit you, this and that." I go, "We're good. We don't have to have this shouting match. It's okay. I'm fine. You're fine. We're good." And I guess he didn't like that. I wasn't saying it. I wasn't cussing. I wasn't yelling at him. I was trying to not escalate. So he peels off, screeches his tires, goes all the way around the parking lot behind me, slams on his brakes right behind me. So I'm boxed in. I'm sitting in my car seat by the time with the door open, and he flings his door open, gets out, starts shouting, saying, "Hey, we can fight. We can do this. I'll kick your ass," all this stuff. And he's lifting his shirt up. I couldn't really tell if he was trying to show me that he had a gun or not, but he was doing that thing where you lift your shirt up like you're ready to fight. And I was like, dude, I promise we're okay. Please don't come over here. We're good. You know what? You're right about everything. It's all good. And I don't think I felt my heart going until he left the parking lot. And I thought to myself afterwards, I was like, if I was not confident in my ability to defend myself, if he had come all the way to me, I probably would have shouted at him or yelled at him or given him the finger or something. My defense mechanism was to be calm, but because I have that ability, if I didn't have that ability, my defense mechanism would have been just like a dog. He's barking at me, I'm going to bark back. We used to have a German Shepherd when I was a kid that was 120 pounds, and that dog never barked back at another dog because he didn't have to bark back. And I think the fact that he never barked back, it messed with those dogs, because they would bark at him and they'd be like, "Wait a second, he's not barking back, never mind." So being able to doing the physical training that you're teaching officers, it doesn't just help. And that's why I don't think a lot of people who haven't experienced it don't understand is it doesn't just help when the physical altercation is happening. It helps avoid a physical altercation in the first place.
Well, yeah. I mean, it simply becomes an ego thing at a certain point, right? Kick off that badge and gun and you're nothing. Hey, you know what? You're probably right. I am nothing, but let's not get you an extra charge, right? Let's just go figure out what we got to figure out now. Okay. Because again, you are in an official capacity. And if they do decide to assault you, then that is additional charges on them. And those charges usually are not little ones, right? So, no, you are 100% correct, right? If you know your capabilities because you train them on a weekly basis or on a reoccurring basis, you know your capabilities, but also too, just like you talked about, being able to verbally de-escalate the situation. In your case, more of a road rage, self-defense, type situation. People who sometimes they're just looking for something, they're just kind of wanting it. And that's not to be complacent or just, hey, I have really good verbal skills, I don't need to train. So sometimes people are alive because other people let you live. That's kind of a hard phrase to sometimes digest for other people. Because there have been times where I've seen things happen. I've maybe personally experienced things have happened where I got lucky, right? As opposed to being good. And sometimes that's not really necessarily the best feeling. You can do everything right and still get shot in the face. Bob Keller, he's a really good buddy of mine, former Delta. He says that all the time. He's had friends die, literally do everything right and still get shot in the face. So with that being said, this is why we prepare for the worst day. Again, maybe what if that guy started to approach you and he then pushed you into your car and now your mobility is limited. And now whether you have access to whatever tools you have on your persons is.
Yeah. And I had the ability to just let him leave, right? I'm not trying to, if I'm an officer in that situation, I can't just go, hey man, why don't you get back in your car, go home? Like, I can't do that. I got to address it.
You can. You can.
I don't know, maybe, yeah.
But it's all circumstantial, right? Picking your battles is also a very important lesson to sometimes teach law enforcement, right? Cops have gotten into a lot of trouble doing things they shouldn't be doing in the first place, right? They made a mountain they made a molehill into a mountain, basically, that didn't need to happen. Whether maybe there was something that was actually going on there, and they didn't know how to solve the problem due to lack of training or lack of experience, right? And now it becomes this big ordeal that maybe should never happened. And that's because, again.
Well, do you find that officers who are smaller stature, whether they're women or just guys who are smaller, are escalating situations more often because they maybe lack that knowledge that I don't know if I can win this if it goes to confrontation?
Well, yes. I think stature is important. Size, just again, we talk about just from the officer presence standpoint. But I would even say it just goes lack of understanding true capabilities, because maybe they've been in a similar situation 50 times and it's always worked out until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't work out and it goes south real quick, that's when the true test comes out. And that's where you start to see a lot of the training scars, and you start to see the lack of exposure in certain environments and certain situations, with the lack of ability to manipulate certain tools on their belt that would give them the advantage, but it really comes down to the person itself, right? Everybody, there's a major tool reliance in law enforcement, particularly with the Taser, right? I think it's some type of magic button when in reality, the Taser fails about 50% of the time.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
What do you mean it fails? It just does not work, or it just doesn't shoot?
Correct. So they're not achieving NMI. So they're not achieving the spread to where they get the response they want. It's one of those things where a lot of factors play into it. Obviously, like the spread of the probes, the individual's clothing. If they're wearing like a thick jacket or something like a Carhartt jacket, the probes may not make connection, meaning it's not going to work. Some people just don't have an effect to it. And so you'll see it in a lot of videos. You'll see the Taser being deployed. You hear like a pop, pop, or a pop. And then you'll see the suspect doing nothing happens. The suspect starts kind of waving his arms or starts pulling probes off. And then the officer just kind of freezes there for a second. And sometimes it is a true taser reliance where that was their only option because it's always worked and now it doesn't work. And now their brain's going, help, SOS, and they don't know what to do. Right.
What's the next move?
Right. And this is where you start to see, certain cops go certain ways. Now there are cops that, hey, the taser's a great tool. When it works, perfect. That's what it's there for. It's a great tool, but you should not be reliant on that. Your tools should enhance your hands-on skills, not the other way around, right? Like you should be competent going hands-on, and then your taser should be a tool that you can utilize for certain situations, right? The good thing about a taser is it allows us to deploy from a distance as opposed to being within within proximity to somebody, right? So it's not a lethal option. It's a less lethal option. But again, sometimes it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, now what are your options there? Some people you have your OC spray, which is absolutely terrible in a one-on-one situation. You have your
Right. So like pepper spray type thing?
Yes, correct.
Why is that terrible?
Well, it's because there's cross-contamination. So if the wind's blowing the wrong way and it ends up going in your face, you now get pepper sprayed. And then everybody that comes in contact with that individual might now have OC spray on their hands. And now when you go to wipe your face, so when I went through the police academy, everybody got sprayed, right? And for me, I know what it does to me. It completely shuts me down. So that was a realistic experience I had in a controlled environment, knowing that if I get pepper sprayed in the face, I am of no use to anyone. Everything starts leaking, right? So,
and now you're vulnerable.
Yes, you're extremely vulnerable. And so I'm not a huge fan of that. The baton, which is like that collapsible baton. I think I might have one around here, where you kind of like they hit it out. It's like a baton that's about this big.
Yeah, it's like a television antenna.
Correct. Those are basically kind of worthless as well. They're good for maybe.
Right?
Oh yeah, they're terrible.
See, I'm scared of all of these things. Like you're always saying, all these are worthless. Like every one of these, you pull them out. I'm like, oh, okay, I give. Cool.
They're not worthless but they cause pain compliance, right? The issue with pain compliance is not very reliable. It fails a lot, right? If someone is high on some type of narcotic, PCP, whatever the case may be, some type of stimulant, it does nothing. I've had individuals get pepper sprayed and literally just wipe it off like nothing happened.
Ooh.
Well, yeah, and I imagine that it's kind of like in jiu-jitsu. There are guys who will train a certain move and it works 100% of the people in the training room. They go to a competition, they get that move, the guy doesn't tap, and they go, what the hell? Everybody taps. Everybody I train with taps to this. And it's because the threshold for getting me to quit when something is on the line is much higher than the threshold for getting me to quit when it's just my own ego in the practice room and nobody's even watching. But when it's my life is on the line, it's even higher than the competition.
Right. Well, that's why it's good to have options, right? And there's always something to say about you don't want to be the baddest motherfucker in the room either when you're training. Yeah. You want to not be that guy. Because I like to be. I love learning, right? I started training jiu-jitsu about 7 years ago because I had an incident at work where a guy had a child support warrant and it was like 2:00 in the morning and he was on kind of like he was like near a river and it was kind of like a dock-ish type area. And I went to grab him and he pulled away from me and I didn't have anywhere to like really create space because there was water basically on each side. And, my brain went, you don't know what to do here. Hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I was like, this is terrifying. So, luckily I have really good communication skills and was able to talk him into handcuffs, right? Because that is a real thing. And I was like, hey man, sometimes dispatch is wrong. Just need to verify that it was definitely him. But I was like, just need to verify that this is you. And then if it's not, then we're all good. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. Like once he realized that it could potentially be a mistake. But that was what I had. And then that next day I started training jiu-jitsu. But, to kind of go back to your point is having options is extremely important. And that's why we talk about the tools going hands-on. And then when you do go hands-on, having options based off of those responses from the suspect. Now, not necessarily relying on just blunt force, like the baton strikes to control a suspect because pain compliance it's not high percentage. It's not high percentage. We want to aim for structural control and then custody.
Yeah, there's that hits people like that's a real wake up call, I would imagine, when you try something.
Getting hit.
No. When you try something and you know it hurts, like you know what it feels like to get tased or to get whacked with the baton, and you're like, that guy ate it. Like he's just going. I mean, I was talking about the jiu-jitsu move. There's a couple of moves that are pure pain moves. Like they're not really gonna break anything. You're not gonna tear anything. And in training, like it hurts. It hurts bad. You really want them to stop. And then in a competition, you'll be surprised. Like, oh, this guy is willing to be in this much pain to win some, totally BS tournament match against me.
Or they want to let it break, right? Like
some people will let it break. Yeah.
Let it break, right? And that's, again, now think about that from, I'm not going back to jail and now there's weapons involved, right? So the moment you start to involve weapons, this is kind of where what one of my companies does is we basically take the aspects of jiu-jitsu, wrestling, striking, integrate it with weapons into the environment of policing. When you start to incorporate weapons, it becomes a little bit of a different ball game along with the environment. And I'm not just talking about the actual tangible environment itself. I'm also talking about case law, policy, general orders, other things that cops have to follow, use of force guidelines, because those obviously will dictate the outcome of the situation as well. Because law enforcement can still be charged criminally and civilly if deemed unjustified. And that's where also a lot of guys get hemmed up as well, is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something, right? Just because like, oh, yes, technically by Graham v. Connor or your policy, you could technically have shot this person, but should you have, you know what I mean? And this is kind of where high level of skill and training come in. And
so what is the Graham v. Connor case?
Yeah. So Graham v. Connor is basically the use of force statute. It's what deems force reasonable for law enforcement, right? So it is, so you have a Graham v. Connor, Tennessee versus Garner, which is like the fling felon rule. So those kind of drive use of force for law enforcement. Those are the two major cases. And then you have like your Terry versus Ohio. So there's so much case law out there, right? And so we try to contain it to a few case laws that's more digestible for law enforcement. Now, your agency policy is also going to dictate your use of force based off of those, based off of that case law. So like, for example, taser utilization. Some people can utilize a taser for, I think this is more rare now, but verbal non-compliance, right? Some people used to be able to get tased for just saying, let me see your ID. No, tase. Okay. That's kind of going away, but now it's it's like active aggression, right? So, or like active resistance. So it's like, they're like, I'm not going back. They're fighting to get away from you and you're not able to control them.
So that's department by department. That sort of
so they're all relatively similar, but there are some nuances there. Like a canine deployment can only be utilized on someone that's maybe being like active aggression. So they're trying to attack you. Does that make sense? Or maybe they've committed some type of violation, like maybe they've committed a felony or whatever the case may be. So again, it's going to be very dependent on the agency's policy, which is then driven by the Supreme Court case law.
Right. So I know one of the cases is like if somebody's running away, you can't shoot them. Right. So that you can't just shoot somebody for running.
Right. So like so that's kind of like the fling felon rule comes in.
Right.
Right. So that would be like the Tennessee versus Gardner case.
But what if somebody's hiding out? Can't you send in it seems like I've seen this, somebody's like in a building somewhere, like they're like, come out or we're going to send the dogs in, and they either do or they don't. But that seems like a good use of canine, to like, hey, we don't want to go into the weeds or down to the river. We're just going to send the dogs and
sure. The canine is a phenomenal tool for law enforcement. A lot of people don't like it. due to the fact that sometimes dogs do get injured and killed. I'm relatively familiar with law enforcement, canine training, working dog training. I actually have a German Shepherd who was trained. He was never a sworn police dog, but he was trained as a police dog. And my best friend's a canine sergeant here for the city of Charleston. And, the canine is an amazing tool. A lot of people will be like, hey, we have the house surrounded, come out with your hands up. And they're like, no.
Yeah. Right.
They hear the dog outside. We're going to send the dog in. You'll see demeanors change. There's something about being bit by an animal that just, at least for me, sounds awful. You know what I mean? And I can tell you from taking countless bites through a bite suit, some thinner than others, that it is extremely painful. It is a pain compliance, but it's also a tool to leverage where a lot of these guys, when they send the dogs in, let's say the guy's hiding in a closet, the dog will engage. You're then able to pull the person out using the dog. So the dog is like a pair of vice grips. That dog locks on like to a limb. Then they use the dog on the leash and just pull the person to them. Right. So and that gives you any perspective of how strong these dogs are. And these dogs are very versatile. Like you can send them into attics, you can send them upstairs, and they're really great location tools. Like let's say you're in some type of very large home structure, and there's, I don't know, 15 rooms. You're like, how are we're gonna send all these people in to no, you can send a dog in to search. Once he finds human odor, he can alert on the room where there is human odor. Now, it may not be a bad guy, it could be a kid. But at least high probability someone might be in that room, right? And then you can start to do your call outs from there and however.
Yeah, I would be scared shitless if I was hiding and I hear the barking, because you can't reason with the dog. You can't go, okay, I give up.
Yeah.
The dog's just going to keep
You
biting.
can't tap out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a video of I think it was in Alaska. They were on a felony car stop, or the guy ran into the woods, and the officer pretended to be a dog. I guess he had a really good dog bark, and
Oh, that's so good.
and he was on the PA pretending to be the dog, and the guy gave up. He's like, man, that actually worked. You know what I mean? But that just goes to show you and they're so good. Like if you get a really good patrol canine, they can track you for miles, like like you can throw out food, you can throw out pounds of bacon, nothing. Like you can think you're gonna, I'm gonna throw some clothes over here, then I'm gonna run the other way. You're not. Like we're gonna find you. And just the way there's just so much science behind scent work and how they utilize their nose and the certain commands. So I get really, really hyped up when we start talking about canine stuff, because man, it is just such a great tool for law enforcement. It keeps a lot of cops. They've saved a lot of cops' lives.
Yeah.
And man, they're just again, they have to be highly trained. There's obviously some guys that don't take their canine training seriously, or they become too accustomed to the house, they become pets, and then they lose their workability, and that's a whole different ballgame.
So these people are taking these home with them, like canine officers take the dogs home with them.
Oh yeah. They get most cops get some type of assigned overtime per day to take care of the dog, to feed the dog, walk the dog. Yeah, they are.
Wow.
They are. Yeah. So
I don't know what I assumed. I guess I thought they were at military camp, basically. The dogs are living in the barracks
At the headquarters.
some of them do have kennels, but a lot of them take them home because, hey, you're on call, you're attached to a specialized unit, you have to wake up at 2:00 in the morning. So they have the outfitted vehicles, the kennels at home, they provide the food, the vet bills.
How much of that is just the normal instinct of the animal? Because I think a lot of people think that, rightly or wrong, if I've got a German Shepherd or a Doberman or whatever, this dog's going to protect me if I'm out on a walk and somebody tries to attack me. How much of that is true? Like how much of that is the dog's going to protect you?
I'm only speaking from my experience, and I actually made a post about this not that long ago on my personal page. Most people think my dog will protect me. My dog will just come out of nowhere and put on his cape and just bite the bad guy or whatever the case may be. The fact of the matter is that's probably not going to happen. Dogs, particularly working dogs, they are tested for certain drives: fight drive, fear, right? Survival. Dogs are genetically just like people, right? You can teach confidence, but courage is one of those things that's somewhat genetic. And so you have to teach, you have to basically test these dogs to see which ones have those genetics, because it is a genetic trait. My dog Gilly came from a litter of 8. Of the 8, maybe 1 or 2 had the drives to bite. And then you have to nurture those drives until they're about.
Which is the opposite of what most people are going to do with a pet.
Right.
Right. So you basically, the moment you start doing obedience on a dog, you start to cap drives, right? So obedience is the break. So for Gilly, basically for the first 10 to 12 months of his life, I could not correct him for biting. Because if I did, I would take that drive. Now, there are ways to direct attention to certain things like a tug. But I actually have a video of, because I used to take him to Lowe's all the time for just like, environmental exposure. And I used to have these Merrell shoes that had like a 550 cord type shoelace, like a bungee. And for some reason, he just loved them. So like I would be walking around Lowe's with this German Shepherd attached to my foot. And people were looking at me all weird. I'm just like, how are you? How's it going? And this dog just going crazy on my foot. But I would have to redirect his energy to his tug, or his red pipe was kind of his treat. And so a lot of people don't really understand that your pet dog is probably not going to protect you the way that you think it's not going to be the movies. The dog's now the dog might bark and that might scare whoever away, and perfect. That's all you want is just the bark. Cause there is a lot of liability with the bite. Right. But it's called controlled aggression. Like my dog, I have 4 kids. I have 11-month-old twins, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And all of my kids can be around my German Shepherd. No problem. They can tug with him. They can play with him. They can pull his ears. They can punch him in the face. They can do whatever. They make him throw a trash can at him. He won't care. But the moment it's time to go to work, it's a different ball game. Right. And he's great. You guys could come to the home. He'd let you pet him, whatever the case may be. But he knows he has a job to do. But that's all ingrained in the first 12 months so that we don't cap those drives. And then that's when we start to guide them down okay, this is the controlled side of things. This is how you out. This is how you sit. This is how you lay down. This is your search command. So, I'll give you an example. I came home one day, the back door was open. We were out as a family. I tell my wife to go back in the car. I grab my gun. I let my dog out and I give him a search command. So now he's going to start searching the house for any other human other than us, because nobody should be in the house. Nobody. Right. So he starts searching, he goes upstairs, he starts searching, then he comes back downstairs and he's like, there's nobody here, basically. It's kind of what he tells me. And I'm like, okay, cool. So it makes me feel better. I still go and do my search as well, just to make sure with him. But again, it's just a huge confidence boost knowing that I don't have to send myself up the stairs to go search the house. I can send him. And if someone's there, then I'll know it because they'll start screaming probably. Right. And then I can back out, call 911, and then have law enforcement do their thing here.
So there's not a higher instance of these types of dogs like biting family members at home when they're off work.
For sure. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There having incidences, again, it's all depend on to the dog's behavior, the dog's kind of personality. These dogs are meant to work. Right. So if you want a pet, get a black lab, whatever the case may be. German Shepherds are great dogs. Dobermans are great dogs. They are a working breed. And they are meant to work. My German Shepherd does not lay down. If he lays down, it's because he's purely exhausted.
Yeah.
2:00 in the morning, he's just running laps. He's just,
I've noticed that. We'll be out in the backyard. Yeah. We have a German Shepherd. We'll be out in the backyard and that dog does not lay down. He's not going to lay down at your feet. He is circling the yard. And if he sits down with his back to me.
That's right.
And he's looking out all over the place.
They are just built to work. And this is also why, like, when law enforcement or working dogs retire from working, they don't live very long. They kind of lose their purpose.
Man, that's true with people.
It's extremely true with people.
We see that all the time. You know, clients who they work their whole life and their ultimate goal and aim is, I want to quit my job one day. I want to retire. And they retire and they have no idea what the heck they're going to do with their life. They don't know how they're going to get social connection. They don't know how they're going to get a sense of purpose. They don't know how they're going to stay active. All they've thought about is, can I afford to meet my needs and maintain my lifestyle without working? And the answer might be yes to that, but they've not put any thought in anything else. And those people age like you would not believe.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's same as dogs, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's super sad. The work that you do, are your clients individual officers who are interested in improving their skills, or are they departments that want all of their officers to improve their skills?
So I own a multitude of companies. I have 4 companies, and they all kind of revolve around law enforcement. So I have the fitness company, which is more of the individual officer or individual buying a program to elevate their level of fitness and wellness. So we have, it's, excuse me, it's purely online. We have an app, but we also start doing like more of some wellness stuff. So like, you get your blood work done and, they start to look at the biomarkers and all that kind of stuff too. Then I have the combatives company, which is then more geared towards the agencies. So the agencies will bring us in, they'll host a course. And it's a 4-day, 40-hour course. And then we have a 4-day, 32-hour level 2 course, which is more of like the scenario-based training where it's like the simunition training. And we're teaching these instructors on how to bring it back to their agency to then spread the good word, right? So the majority of our clients from the combative side, from the DT subject control side, are law enforcement agencies. Now, we have had officers pay their own way. We've had some members from the general public attend as well. Like, we do have open courses for the most part, as long as the venue allows the general public. A lot of our people that pay on their own are jiu-jitsu owners, like jiu-jitsu school owners that train cops. So we want to be able to give them access. We have a certified academy program where we actually certify the school to teach our curriculum, so that they can, again, open that up to the law enforcement agencies that are in their area.
Are you finding that you have to, in some cases when you're teaching, unteach learnings? Like,
yeah. So there was a program out there called PPCT, and it stands for Pressure Point Control Tactics. That's what I was trained in when I came to the academy. And it's basically Steven Seagal stuff that really doesn't work. It's derived from attorneys and experts that said it worked without actually truly pressure testing if it worked, because it does not work. And so having people who, yes, unlearning is a major factor. What makes it easier is if people train, like if they have wrestling or jiu-jitsu experience, then it's really easy to just understand that stuff doesn't work. But yes, that is kind of our goal. Is our curriculum is developed for those that, if you have no experience in any type of martial art, you can attend our course and you will leave there knowing more than you did and being a lot more, actually, I'll say this, if you know nothing, you'll leave a lot more capable. Now, you won't be an expert in anything. You won't be a black belt. You won't be any of that jazz, but you'll have a very good foundation and a good pathway, because when we provide continuing education from there, along with certain certifications, we have our own app in that company as well. So there's a lot of online training resources, and people can actually connect with our instructors as well that actually work with the company, so they can, run questions and scenarios by too.
There's no way to get good at combat without consistently training it in an environment that replicates a real combat setting, as much as is possible. And I think a lot of that pressure point garbage is, it's people trying to find the ultimate shortcut. Like, could I learn self-defense on a PowerPoint slide? It's like,
of course,
I mean, you could, but it probably won't be very good. Yes,
exactly. It's going to be terrible. Yeah. And if you take that approach, like you're going to end up doing some stuff that's just garbage. I train with Travis Luter, and he talks all the time about guys that, coaches who don't train. So he's like, man, if I ever get to the point that I can't train, I'm shutting the gym down. It's over, because I'll become the worst coach ever. And there's guys like that who are black belts somehow, some way, but they haven't like actually trained in 10 years. And they start teaching their guys just nonsense crap. And these are guys who used to be really good. Like they know what they at least one time knew what they were doing. And at least at one point were really good at what they did. They don't want to be making up BS. But when they're not actually hands-on doing it, you kind of forget, and it becomes more theoretical than it is practical.
Sure. And that's why the true pressure testing is so important. And that's something that we actually take pride in at EF Combatives is our ability to pressure test, right? Because obviously the ultimate pressure test is the real world application. You doing it real world, seeing it happen. Luckily for us, we've made friends with a lot of our agencies that we work with, and they've given us body cam footage that we do release from time to time. It is sometimes very difficult to get your hands on public body cam footage. And it is amazing because you can clearly see a difference between trained and untrained. And not only that, the amount of data that they've collected, Grand Rapids Police Department, we're actually about to release a really good YouTube, I guess you could say it's like a mini documentary on how Grand Rapids Police Department, they had an officer-involved incident about 2 years ago where it was a fight over a taser. The officer ended up being charged with murder. He basically made a contact shot to the back of the suspect's head while they were fighting on the ground. After that, they brought in our company, revamped their entire DT program. And over the past 2 years, they were able to collect all this data on since implementation. So pre-EFC and then post-EFC. And the amount of data they've collected as it pertains to use of forces, officer injury, suspect injury, lawsuits, payouts, the prevention of an officer-involved shooting due to the application of said techniques or concepts is amazing. It's like almost 80% of all use of force involved our curriculum. And they have all this documented. Like you can see the case law, you can see the body cam footage. And again, we're actually going to release a lot of this body cam footage. And man, it's amazing to watch two officers work together from the time they make contact with an individual to the time he's in handcuffs is sometimes less than 15 seconds and nobody's hurt. So like, there was 3 or 4 incidents they had last year where could have been an officer involved shooting, right? We talked about just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Like there was 3 or 4 incidents, and we're going to release the body cam footage there where suspect is reaching for a pistol, hand on his pistol, and the officers were able to then staple the suspect's limbs, securing the pistol in a safe direction, right? Removing the firearm from the individual and then saving both the individual's life and the cop's life. Cops do a lot, and a lot of people they're never going to hear about it unless we put it out there. Right. And so that was kind of our passion. Jay Wadsworth is the director of combatives. He's one of the co-owners with me. Jay's got about 22 years in law enforcement, up in Jamestown, New York. And, he worked a bunch of special forces. He's a secondary black belt, former professional MMA fighter, SWAT. He's got all kinds of accolades you can think of. And Jay's been the driving force behind this company. From the curriculum-based side, we have 57 instructors. All of them have law enforcement experience. All of them are high-level wrestling, jiu-jitsu, D1, D2 wrestlers, black belts, some are even active professional MMA fighters. So we have a very good cadre, and that's kind of why I think we are growing the way that we are.
That's really impressive to be able to take a situation like that and end it without any injury or tragedy. And that you can only get there with just a mountain of consistent training. because if there's any doubt in your mind as an officer that this is going to work when the guy's got his hand on his gun, I think you're going to shoot the guy.
Well, this is the thing too, is we talk about, you said massive amounts of training. You would be surprised how little training it does take to make someone proficient enough to do what they need to do. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be perfect. I'm not saying that's going to work every time, but I'm saying that with our curriculum and how we integrate it into agencies, we're able to get someone from zero to competent in a very short period of time without having to train, without having to be a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, right? Like it's just not practical.
Days, weeks. What do you?
Yeah. So like if it's integrated correctly, if cops are training on a consistent basis, like I'll give you an example, Grand Rapids Police Department, they have a mat room and they allow like open mat DT training weekly. And it first started slow, of course, because they're skeptical. Then once they started seeing shit actually works on the street, it makes me better at my job. Weird, right? They started showing up. So we're talking like you give someone a good foundational course, you give them, let's say 1 hour a week. 1 hour. 1 hour a week for 6 months. They will be a completely different police officer.
That makes sense to me. And I say massive, like 10 years, obviously.
Yes. Because then they start to understand the roles. Because again, it's usually not single officer response for some of these larger agencies, right? Usually it becomes a team tactic, knowing your role, knowing your responsibility, understanding communication. And that's where we start to see it. So we talk about a learning curve. We're able to really amplify that now with technology. We have our own app. They can basically learn on demand whenever they want. And a lot of the curriculum too is kind of built on itself. So once you have that foundation, anything in addition to that is still built on that same foundation. So it's not necessarily technique based as it is concept and principle based. As long as you're staying within certain principles and concepts, the likelihood of you having a successful outcome is going to be greater. Again, not going to say 100% because everything fails, but I'm saying that if you stay within the principles and concepts that are basically based in jiu-jitsu and wrestling that we know are highly effective, you're more than likely going to have a successful outcome.
What are the most basic of those concepts and principles?
Sure. So like, I'll give you one example. So if someone is on the ground and you're able to get all their limbs to one side of their body, arms and legs, okay, you're able to basically pin all of their limbs to one side of their body, they're greatly reduced in what they can do. That's one concept. So how do you get there? Well, in your brain, you're probably like, I can think of 5 ways to get there. Great. So like, as long as you think in your brain, I remember I had to get all the limbs pointed away from me. If I can establish a near side arm, so like if I'm in a knee on top position, let's just say that you're on your back, prone down on the ground, and my shin is across like the bottom of a seatbelt, across your waistline. Okay. And I pick up your near side arm to me. Okay. And I push it across your body. So your arm is now like this. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be really hard for you to do much of anything, grab anything, whatever the case may be. And I'm in a position where I still have my mobility, right? We always want to try to maintain our mobility. So that's one principle that we want to keep in mind. I want to be able to disengage if I have to. I want to be able to stay engaged if I have to, right? So we don't want to sacrifice our mobility on purpose. Okay. Creating limbs to one side is a huge concept. One thing is understanding when weapons are involved. Knives, right? It's really hard for someone to stab you with a knife from 25 feet away. Okay. But my bullets can walk. So if I recognize someone has a knife, maybe it might be a better idea for me to disengage, create space because I have my mobility, and then go to a tool. Now, if I'm in close proximity, this is where the weapons-based stuff becomes kind of tricky, but not really. If I'm in close proximity and we both have guns, okay, and and I say, oh no, gun, and I bail, now we both can shoot each other, right? So ties and gunfights suck. We don't want to do that. So if we're engaged, but I'm able, because I'm in a better position, to pin your gun to your body, or pin the gun to the floor, or get to the barrel of the gun to where I can pin it somewhere. But I can then draw my gun, but you can't draw yours. Who's more than likely going to win that one? Me, because I have control. So one principle is, if I can create distance, that's going to give me time. But if I can't create distance, the only other thing to give me time is control. So now I have to control in order to create time to do whatever I have to do to escalate or de-escalate force, right? And so those are the principles and concepts. We try to create these guys, we try to make them become thinkers and not just robots, because every situation, there's no way we can train every single person for every single scenario. So we try to do it to where, think about this. If you see a gun, maybe the best thing to do is to stay engaged. Because if you disengage, it becomes who's faster, who's more accurate. You don't want that, right? So those kind of things are some that we actually do in our courses. We pressure test them. We let these guys experience it, right? The level 1 is more of that foundational setting instructor course, where they come in, we take them from everything from case law all the way to team tactics and sometimes vehicle extractions. The level 2 is more of the scenario based, where they put on the helmets. They use the UTM guns that shoot like little paintballs, basically. And then we introduce weapons into the mix. And then they have to go through their, call for backup, self-assessment, make sure their gun's operable. So there's just so many other things that kind of play into it. But just like you said, we're putting them in those situations to gain that knowledge. Then they take that knowledge back to their agency, integrate it, and then it spreads throughout the agency via in-service. So the learning curve, our job is to make that learning curve as quickly as possible without sacrificing effectiveness and efficiency, and also maintaining modern and relevant tactics and data.
Adam, this has been really fascinating. What would you say is your top decision-making tip for business owners?
Top decision-making tip, try to be as objective as possible. I think that a lot of people struggle with that. I know I did, getting emotional within the business realm. If you feel like you're getting emotional, take 20 minutes or take 24 hours. Those are kind of my two things. I listen to a lot of Alex Hormozy, who's probably the most objective business guy out there, I would think. I don't think the guy actually has feelings. So he's a good dude. We actually have conversations. He's a great guy. I don't necessarily agree with some of the life things he talks about, but I think from the business sense is trying to remain objective and then staying mission driven is kind of one of our core values here. Is you have to be a mission driven individual in order to work for me or with one of my companies. Because if you're mission driven, we deal with people, who we teach life-saving and life-taking skills. This isn't like we're selling vacuum cleaners. No hate to those, vacuum cleaner guys, but I actually did sell vacuum cleaners back in college. So it's we just take it seriously, because some people don't go home if we don't teach the best that we can. So be objective, stay mission driven, and then those are honestly the two things that I think about daily.
Adam Haidary, thanks for being here, man. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can just follow my Instagram. It's just my name. It's gonna be Adam.Haidary. You can follow my other companies, EF Combatives on Instagram, Effective.Fitness Training on Instagram, Police Post on Instagram. We have websites linked there. We offer law enforcement training on the case law side, more of like the admin side. We obviously offer fitness training. We're about to launch one-on-one personal training there, all digital, all on your phone. You actually will talk to a person, not some AI robot. We still take pride in that. And then on the EF combative side, if you are interested in any type of self-defense or concealed carry, We do offer courses for law enforcement, but also for the general public as well. And we have some online courses as well there. So feel free to follow those pages. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any of those pages as well.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Of course. I appreciate you guys.
My first takeaway when talking to Adam is I know I don't want to get in a wrestling match with a cop because I know I'm going to lose. So I try to avoid.
You realize that today?
Yeah, just today. Yeah, it was the first time. Yeah, so I try to avoid that. As a principle of life. My takeaway is that, and he talked about it sort of at the end, is that looking at having basic fundamental principles of operation. And it's not just, make sure officers are trained so they do the right thing. They can make good decisions at high emotions. Sure. But he started going through principles of how to interact if you're in a physical
choices.
Yeah. How to, so, okay, I want to get their arms away from me or, whatever it is. I want to separate when I need to separate. And I think there are in all businesses, you've got to figure out what are those fundamental operating principles. So if you're a financial advisor, everybody gets a financial plan. Everybody follows asset allocation with a model portfolio. Here's what we do. Here's what we don't do. You've got to have those. So
I think a principle is even, because this is my takeaway too, a principle is even more broad than that sometimes.
Okay.
Because it is related to how I'm making choices in situations with unknown variables and unknown outcomes, or maybe unique variables. And
what do you mean?
So a lot of people who focus on learning moves, for example, in martial arts, they progress much slower because you can't just memorize 1,000 moves and then there you go and you're done.
Okay.
You've now learned all the moves.
Okay.
No, you have to understand the principles. And some teachers teach the sport or the art as a series of principles, and some don't. Some inadvertently teach it as a series of moves. But the people who understand the principles, whether because they've been taught or they innately are able to distill it, are able to progress much quicker. You've had a situation where employees come to you and they go, hey, this is what happened. This client asked for this. This is the situation. What do I do? And you're like, dude, why are you asking me? Like, I'm in a worse position to answer this because I'm away from the situation. Whereas if you have a principle that they can follow, they're going to adhere to it, for example. So I had employees that were struggling with like how to respond to emails to complex questions or something. Or they would send emails and the person wouldn't respond, or they would respond to not the most important part of the email. So I was like, well, we have a problem with how we're writing emails. Well, what I can't do is teach you how to write every single email, right?
Right.
I can't write every email for you. I'm not going to proofread every email for you. So it forced me to come up with the principle. And one of those is like, make the action item visibly stand out. So if there's an action item, it's got to visibly be noticeable to someone so that when they glance at the email that you've sent, they understand you're asking them of something. And you can have 3 paragraphs of context before and after it if you feel like that's necessary. You can have attachments, you can have this, you can have that. But is the action item clear? Does it visually stand out? And if it does, then that you're in a better position to get someone to actually acknowledge it and respond to it versus get overwhelmed with a really long email, overlook the action item or whatever. And so we didn't come up with like a rule of always put it in this order with this font and with this bold and this typeface. We said, make it visually stand out. And there's the principle.
I had a training manager early on in my career, and one of his principles was always tell the person what could go wrong. And I was initially, your early reaction is as a new person in a sales related business, you're like, don't I want to just tell them all the good stuff? I want to avoid the bad stuff. I don't want, and he goes, no. Not only is it compliant, it's straightforward and honest, but you also erase that concern from the person's mind.
Yeah.
If you've said, here's what could go wrong with this, or here's why some people don't do this, or here's you should know that it has this risk or this expense or this, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's an example. I think that's a great example of using a principle to guide decision making versus somebody else might try to approach it as, okay, we have 20 different offerings. What's the script I have to memorize on all of these 20 offerings?
Right.
Oh my gosh, dude, I'm not going to build that for you.
Right.
Always explain to them what could go wrong. There you go. We're done. Just remember that. And I don't have to tell you exactly how to say every single thing 20 times.
Right.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision by subscribing to the show and leaving us a review wherever you're listening. We appreciate the support. It helps business owners like you find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com, on Instagram at decidedlypodcast, or grab a copy of Sanger and Sean's books from the links in the show notes. Finally, we'd like to thank Shelby Peterson of Transcend Media for editing and post-production of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Morgan, your producer, and this is Decidedly.